Hi, my name's David Warriner, and I'll be reading to you from my translation of Johana Gustawsson's The Bleeding, published by Orenda Books. The Bleeding is a historical thriller that weaves together three different timelines from 1899 to 1949 and 2002. It tells the story of three different women whose lives are somehow interwoven over those different timelines. We're going to flash forward to Detective Maxine Grant with the Quebec Provincial Police in 2002. She's investigating the murder of Philippe Caron, whose wife Pauline is suspected of his murder. Without further ado, let's move on. The English call it a folly, a garden extravagance, a building surrounded by green space which serves solely to make casual strollers scratch their heads and ponder whether they've come across a theatre, a storage shed, or a cenotaph. In our case, I wonder if this isn't all three at once. Jules, Gina, and I came across this folly combing the north to northeast corner of the Carons property. The top of one of the columns was sticking out of a scruffy thicket at the summit of a hillock. From a distance, it looked like someone had carved a pine cone out of stone and hung it from a tree like a Christmas decoration. We scaled the slope in a matter of strides and found ourselves looking at a building around 4 by 3 meters in size. A roofline like battlements, red bricks tarnished by cold and blackened with moss, a heavy wooden door that must have been painted red at some point, weathered by snow with 2 rusty keyholes. "So is this place going to painfully destroy our hopes too, do you think?" Jules asked me. He always gets testy when he's feeling anxious. I don't think I'm barking up the wrong tree, not this time, but I can't be sure until we have a look inside. And the problem is we haven't been able to do that, for the simple reason that this folly is not actually on the Carons estate, but on the neighbouring property, and that belongs to the Lalangers, an influential dynasty that's ruled the roost in Lac Clarence for the past 2 centuries. In other words, we could have picked an easier bone to dig up. And so we've trudged back in frustration to the incident room, with our proverbial tail between our legs to wait not so patiently for Marceau to secure a warrant. It's going to be a good 48 hours since the top brass are falling over themselves to make sure a legal avalanche doesn't come barreling down on them. Now Jules and I are in the viewing room and Marceau has just come in to join us. The big boss has found a perch beside me, hands stuffed in the pockets of her navy blue pleated slacks, the big lapels of her blazer spilling over her trim forearm muscles. "Here's how we might go about speeding things up," she sighs. "No barking, no yapping of orders, just a conditional statement." I wonder where she's going with this, though it's clear she has a shortcut up her sleeve, which is a first. "You could go and see Yvonne Lalanger, Lieutenant, in Montreal. Ask her if she would agree to sign an authorization for us, so that we could look inside that outbuilding pursuant to our inquiries into the murder of Philippe Caron. Quite simply because we want to leave nothing to chance, and it's important to turn over every stone that warrants attention. With the weekend coming, it'll be much faster to get her permission in writing than to wait for a warrant. We'll still get one, of course, but her cooperation will make our job easier and allow us to move on to the next phase of the investigation, and of course, we'll be sure to publicly praise her valuable assistance and readiness to help." "Would you like me to frame things that way?" "Not if you have a problem with that, Lieutenant." "No problem at all. That said, you might run into one once we open up that folly." Her gaze seems to float for a moment. "I know, Lieutenant. I'll do a debrief with Professor Momini after her interview with Mrs. Caron, then I'll hit the road." "Good," she says, turning to the video monitor. Gina's just taken a seat in the interview room across from Pauline. This time the psychologist isn't smiling. She's tapping on the table between them. She reminds me of a pianist. "Pauline, I'd like to go over the sequence of events with you." Gina's staring down at her virtuoso's fingers. "All we have in the living room where Philippe died is evidence that incriminates you, Pauline. Every stain, every drop of blood, every print points to the same conclusion. You assaulted and killed your husband." Mrs. Caron turns to face the wall to her left, as if there was a window there. "The detectives have deduced that you pushed him." Mrs. Caron's eyes flicker to the door of the room, giving the impression that someone's just knocked and is waiting for permission to come in. Maybe she's expecting to see me. Gina looks up now and locks her in her sights, invasive, insistent. "Did your husband push you, shove you, or shake you before you killed him, Pauline? What really happened?" Pauline's eyes wander out beyond her imaginary window. She knows that if they meet Gina, she'll be drawn in, she'll be cornered, and she'll break. That's the impression her flighty posture gives me, at least. Or perhaps that's what I would do if Gina were hounding me that way. You must have had to leave your husband lying on the floor, Pauline, then walk out of the living room, go across the hallway, enter the kitchen, open the drawer, choose a knife, pick it up, close the drawer again. Gina allows herself to take a breath. Then you must have gone back into the living room to kneel down beside your husband and stab him 31 times. Mrs. Caron blinks. Her eyelids open and close slowly like a lizard lazy from the sun. It's time to talk, Pauline. Time for you to make yourself heard, to give your version of the facts before it's too late and there are no more deals to be made. Pauline must be imagining her forest through that window. Pauline, we found your little extravagance in the gardens. Pauline frowns. It looks like she doesn't know what Gina's talking about. Could I be wrong? We found your folly, Pauline, tucked away on the Lalonge's property. Pauline closes her mouth. It's been open a fraction until now. She presses her thighs together. I wish I'd seen his eyes, she suddenly whispers, when I stabbed him, to see his surprise, his pain, his grief. Not from leaving me, from having to go. I wish he'd seen me too, seen me take back everything I gave him that he didn't deserve. Thank you.